Good morning. How are you guys doing today? Kids believe in Santa Claus until a certain age. Sooner or later, they start to doubt if he really exists. My daughter just turned 8 years old, and recently she asked me, Mom, who's really buying all those presents and putting them under the tree? Trying to hold on just a little bit longer to the magic, I answered, a higher power. Oh, so it's Dad then. Skepticism is the beginning of faith. Oscar Wilde had that to say. Our theme for the month of September at Centers for Spiritual Living is facing the fear. And last week, Reverend Lane talked about what is beyond the reach of proof. If you haven't heard that message, I really encourage you to go back and watch it. And what was interesting for me is that it triggered an old thought pattern for me, and it directly ties to our topic for today. She stated with great conviction that underneath it all, no matter what is happening, that all is truly well. And while that's totally true, when she said it, I had this tinge in my belly, and I'm like, yeah, but what if you're not there yet? What if you're having a moment where that doesn't feel true? Or what about the times when you have a situation or experience that feels drastically contrary to all being well? So today we're going to talk about skepticism, doubt, and faith. And to me, those feel like really huge topics in light of everything that's going on in the world right now. Never before have we experienced so much division and so much unwillingness to listen to one another. Sometimes we're so deeply attached to our beliefs that we are unwilling to change them, even in the face of facts. We've buried our curiosity, and we don't even make an effort to connect to people who don't believe what we believe. And almost every topic on the news and in social media has become deeply divisive. COVID, Black Lives Matter, in-classroom learning, the elections, the upcoming elections. It's so easy to get caught up in the energy of what's going on around us. There's distrust, there's intolerance. It truly becomes a question of faith. Mark Nepo has this to say: help me resist the urge to dispute whether things are true or false, which is like arguing whether it's day or night. It is always one or the other somewhere in the world. Together we can penetrate a higher truth, which, like the sun, is always being conveyed. So before we dig into faith, let's talk a little bit about skepticism and doubt. Doubt is defined as a feeling of uncertainty or to disbelieve the idea of something. And the term skeptic is derived from the Greek noun skepsis, and it means examination, inquiry, and consideration. Skepticism then is defined as a method of suspended judgment. In other words, doubt is when you're not sure based on your opinions or your beliefs. But skepticism is when you're unsure, and so you probe deeper. You ask hard questions, you examine. The outcome may totally end up the same, but how you got there is very different. Skepticism is also a philosophical, say that 3 times fast, position that one should refrain from making any truth claims at all and avoid any postulation of final truths, because there's no such thing as certainty in human knowledge. And sometimes skeptics can get to the point of not being sure what to believe, if anything, because there's so much persuasive force on both sides. And that to me sounds kind of familiar for the times that we're in. Okay, so why did I tell you that? Why is that important? There's nothing wrong with digging into what it is that you believe. Curiosity, research, examination, It's vital in our search to understand what it is that's true for us. But when we assume that we know it all without any level of inquiry, we close off our connection both to the divine and to one another. We're encouraged to remain open to spirit, open at the top, so to speak. And we know that our thought is creative. And so it's really important to pay attention to our dominant thoughts, especially when it feels like all is not well. Ernest Holmes had this to say: "It's important that you maintain a strict censorship over your thinking. You must refuse entrance to any thoughts you do not wish to see manifested in your life. Guard well the garden of your mind. It's God's garden of your soul." So what are some practical things that we can do when it does not feel like all is well? First thing is we can get quiet. Be still and know. It is impossible to tune in to the divine, to tune into spirit when we're multitasking, when there's all the chatter and buzzing around you. It's an opportunity, really a call to stop, to get still, and to open our heart. Ask Spirit what it is that you need to know about the situation. If possible, approach it from a place of curiosity. I wonder why I lost my job. I wonder what Spirit has in store for me that required me to leave this relationship. Right? Everything you're feeling about the situation down on paper, it's such an amazing thing to get it out of your body, and then ask Spirit for guidance. Ernest Holmes said this: "When a problem confronts you, take it into the silence of your consciousness. Instead of thinking of the problem, think of the answer. God does not have problems. Therefore, the divine mind is the answer to every human problem." You may get an instant answer, you may get an idea, or it may come to you in a unique way. You might see a Facebook post or a magazine article, or something's uncovered in a conversation with a close friend. Secondly, we can remember that confusion comes from a sense of separation. We are always connected to the divine. And the divine is never confused or afraid, just like the divine doesn't have problems. There's a peace that's possible, a peace that is available to us when we remember our connection to the whole. We're never alone. This concept is at the deepest level of what we teach. Many people believe that God is separate from them, that God is in the heavens and looks down onto us in judgment and condemnation. And we honor all paths. So if that's the space that you're in and that's what you believe, you are absolutely welcome here. We teach God moves in, through, and as each one of us. We are the divine in form. We're stardust in form. And because God moves in, through, and as each one of us, that means we're also connected to one another. And to take that a step further, there is no other. About that for a moment. There is no other. In my favorite passage, and I did a reading last week from the same book, in the book This Thing Called You, Ernest Holmes says this: "The spiritual genius of Jesus lay in his knowledge of spiritual laws. He dared to believe in the invisible source of his being and to trust it. He was not frightened by the storm, nor by the fears of others. He could say peace to both. He was able to bring the calm of others to the surface. This is deep calling unto deep. It's God calling unto God. It's God answering God. Realize that the divine presence is ever with you. There is no place where you leave off and God begins. Deep calling unto deep." The third thing that we can do is surrender and trust that Spirit has our back. And I believe that this is a big part of our life's work. Are we willing to surrender and trust when life throws you a curveball, or when it absolutely did not turn out the way that you expected? Are we willing to examine and change our beliefs when it is obvious that they're no longer working for us? Are we willing to accept that people will behave in ways that we do not understand? And certainly they will behave in ways that we wish that they did not. Can we be in community with one another and interact with one another from a place of love and compassion? I remember the first time that I heard the teaching that the universe is a friendly place and it works together for my good. I was in a Foundations of the Science of Mind class with 60 other people. My immediate gut response was bull crud. Actually, it was a lot stronger word than that. But you get the point. And that response and that gut reaction was from years of proof in my life to the contrary. But you know what? The deeper truth is that I expected and I believed that the universe was not a friendly place and it was not conspiring for my good, and that's exactly what I experienced. I was afraid of my shadow. I was afraid of men. I was afraid of being out alone at night. I was convinced that the people around me had hidden agendas or couldn't be trusted. And looking back on that, that seems so incredibly ridiculous. But for me, it was a long, deeply ingrained belief. It took some time to shift my thoughts and expectations. It did not happen overnight. But today, I absolutely believe that the universe is a friendly place. I believe that it works for my good, I expect that, and I experience that a whole lot more than before. Mark Nepo, in his book, 7,000 Ways to Listen, says this: sooner or later, everyone will face not getting what they want, and how we respond to this unavoidable moment determines how much peace or agitation we will have in our lives. This is the moment that opens all others, for our acceptance of things as they are, and not as we would have them, allows us to find our place in the stream of life. Free of our entitlements, we can discover that we're small fish in the stream and go about our business of finding the current. And so during the days that remain, we're asked by our suffering to look for ways to accept the flow of life rather than control it. Vaclav Havel says this: hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It's not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. I love that last sentence. So now that we have some tools for what we can do when it really doesn't feel like all is well, let's talk about affirmative prayer and the building up of our faith. When we pray, there can be absolutely no doubt in our mind. Jesus said, "It is done unto you as you believe." Faith is like a muscle, and it's built up through our experiences that we have over time. And so I invite you, if you're not already doing it, to keep a journal of your answered prayers. It'll feed your faith muscle. It'll sustain you when you are experiencing challenging times. Pay attention to the good that's happening around you. Look for it. It's there. Get out into nature. Watch an ant, watch a bee. There's such a beautiful example of being in the flow of life, of being in cooperation with their environment and people around them. Set time aside for curiosity and creativity. Bake, garden, dance, paint, sing, read. Find the thing or find the people that make you happy, and consciously choose to do more things that make you happy. Share your good with others. Make your self-care and your spiritual growth a non-negotiable. I'd like to share a personal story, but before I do that, I want to preface it. When I first came into this teaching, and actually before I ever came into this teaching, I was one of those people that really believed that ministers and pastors and clergy and practitioners, they had done all their inner work. They were done. They had it all figured out. And when it seemed like they didn't, I kind of judged them a bit. Any judges in the room? Can you relate to that? And as I grew, and especially as I became a practitioner, I understood that I was very, very wrong about that. Our growth and our development, it's like a spiral, a cycle, it's cyclical. And so, for example, you could work on anger, and that could be resolved for a time, and then years later, out of the blue, when you thought you were done with that, you get handed it right back again for an opportunity to look at it, to maybe go deeper with it. So, all that to say, don't judge. So here's my story. The last time I spoke was Practitioner Sunday in mid-February of this year. My grandmother had just passed like 2 days beforehand, and the topic was pleasure and sacred sexuality. Like there's irony for days there. After caring for her 724 for 3 years and the advancement of a knee injury, I was tired and I was in excruciating pain. On and off during those years, I sometimes forgot. It's not like I don't have tools, but I forgot how to live from love, how to live from a divine perspective. The realities of my everyday life felt hard, and often I felt alone. And this is absolutely not true, but it is so easy to forget the truth when we're in pain. We need each other. At the same time, I was 2 weeks out from a scheduled knee replacement. And as I mentioned earlier, fear is a very old friend and a pattern for me. And I came very close to not having a surgery because I was petrified. However, I also was at a serious crossroad. I was so excited to rejoin the world outside of my house. I was no longer housebound because my grandmother had passed. And teaching art classes, which is something that really feeds my soul, had become almost impossible because of the amount of pain that I was in. It was no way to live. So I pulled out my journal and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote. I wrote about my fears, I wrote about my feelings, I wrote about the pros and cons. I prayed, I meditated, I sat in inquiry with God over what to do. I reached out to several practitioners and we talked through the surface level to get deeper about what was really going on for me. I created an art piece specifically for my surgery. It's layered with prayers and affirmation and courage. And really importantly, I asked the people in this community and I asked the people around me to pray for me. And I think that that's one of the amazing things about our spiritual community. We can know the truth for one another when we have forgotten it for ourselves, or when we're not in a space where we can know it for ourselves. Ultimately, I knew without a doubt that I was supposed to have the surgery. That being said, the knee replacement was difficult. My nerve blocker metabolized before I woke up. The first week was a blur. The first entire month, I couldn't keep food down. My physical therapy was a challenge. But here's the thing. I would not allow myself for even a moment to wonder if I had done the right thing, because I'd already done the work and I already knew. I knew I was supposed to have the surgery, and I knew that God had my back. And I knew that I was safe and supported and loved underneath it all. A month after my surgery is really when it turned and I started to improve. After 2 months, I could walk a mile around the lake in my neighborhood. Everything in my life is different now. I can do things I haven't been able to do in years, things I'd forgotten that I couldn't do anymore. And because I'm not in constant pain, who I am at my deepest level is returning. Who I am in this moment is a much truer me. I had my doubts. I had a time period when I was skeptical, and I had the God of the universe conspiring for my good. And in the returning to myself, my creativity literally exploded. I created an entire body of work during the shelter in place. My joy, my connection to spirit, my connection to this community deepened. I'm excited to be on the planet. I'm feisty, I'm creative, I'm turned on to life, and I am the divine expressing as me. I'll close with a passage from The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. The greatest gift one can give God is to be pleased with his creation. If you want to be close to God, learn to be joyful. If you remain spontaneously happy and centered, no matter what happens, you will find God. That's the amazing part. Yes, you will find happiness, but that's nothing compared to what you're really going to find. The joy becomes overwhelming and your cup runneth over. This is a beautiful path. Be happy. Let's read our affirmation together for today. I live in the faith that there is a presence and power greater than I am, that nurtures and supports me in ways I could not even imagine. And so it is. Thank you.
Thank you.